Hello, well, today I'm speaking with Hazel Seymour. I'm a great friend of mine for a long time. We've attended various physical circles together. Welcome, Hazel,
Hello, hi Paul. Nice to be here.
and thank you very much for joining me today. And I first thought about you when I thought of Michael Roll, because I was reading one of his pamphlets, and you'd met Michael Roll, hadn't you?
I did indeed. It was a long time ago, about 20 years. We had a circle down in Cardiff near Richmond Road, and he was one of the guest speakers, and he did a big evening. There was quite a few people there. And he told us how he came into it and that he was actually employed by the government to go round in some capacity to debunk the idea of life after death.
Wow.
So he went to see this very gifted medium, and a result of the whole thing, to cut a long story short, is it completely turned his ideas on his head. And I always remember he said in one session, he took a mother along who'd lost a little boy, and she was grieving. And the medium manifested the whole child in front of Michael and the mother.
Wow.
And also Michael's father came through, and he said he was sitting in the room with these two ghosts, as normal as you and I. And he said his father put his hand through a solid table, straight through, and said, "This is what you think matter is, and then this is what it's really like." And of course, Michael Roll, being an astrophysicist, was fascinated. And he said our whole concept of matter and neutrons and now how things are made up is wrong. And he wanted to sort of utilize this woman to promote the idea of life after death. But he did actually say that the men in black exist, and this lady was frightened off by men calling at the door, and that never got off the ground.
What a terrible shame.
I know.
Did he say how he was recruited by the government to do that
He
job?
didn't go into them. It was a long time ago. All I know that he was employed by some committee, and he said he was very, very passionate about this, and he was very anti-government. He said there was some committee that was to go round and sort of damp any ideas of life after death, etc., etc. So it is a vague memory because we are going back over 20 years, but he completely turned it on his head when he had the evidence. And from there on, he was a prolific pamphlet and writer, issuer, and he did loads and loads of materials. And of course, one of his best friends was a top government astrophysicist. I can't actually remember his name. And they worked in conjunction, and he said the government then sort of turned against him, and he was poo-pooed and decredited.
Heavens.
He was very passionate about it, rabidly passionate, that the government was trying to suppress the idea of life after death.
And Michael Roll opened up then a website called the Campaign for Philosophical
That's
Freedom.
right. It was a long, windful mouthful. The Campaign for Philosophical Freedom, I think it was called. And he used to go around the country touring, etc., etc. But the one thing I always remember about him is that meeting when he said the boy was there, and then his father walked in, and he said it was as if two people had walked in the room, and his father putting his hand straight through the table as a magician, saying this is what atoms are really like. And he said it changed his whole life, basically, as you would expect it to. Yeah.
Yeah, matter through
He was a
matter.
fascinating individual.
Excellent. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself then? 'Cause I thought you met him in the university in your
So,
capacity there.
well, I mean, my story entry into spiritualism, as you call it, is as a child, a very strange occurrence. There was a huge field of nettles, and I had a ball, and I lobbed it. Now, this ball went into this massive field of nettles, and I knew, oh gosh, and this voice said to me in my head, if we show you where that ball is, will you believe in life after death? So
Wow.
as a child wanting your ball, I went, yeah, whatever, right, you know. And this voice said 7 steps forward, 3 to the left, and it guided me right to that ball. So that awoke my interest that there must be something up there. So then I went through the usual path then of Ouija boards and messing around as teenagers. And my granddad came through and told me he'd had a terrible death, his name and the year he died. So when I checked with my mother, she said, that's rubbish. His name, that's the same as your father. But it was his name. And when I told her more, it was all true. And thereon, I started going to spiritual churches, an avid reader. And then it's the experience that you have personally. I found out that my grandmother was in fact a medium, and my great uncle was an avid spiritualist. So it was in the family. And then I began to attend Circle, and I can still remember the first message I got for someone when I realized that I could connect with the spirit world as well. So I try to, my belief is we're here to love and to help. So
Yeah.
I've tried to use that ability all my life to help people who are desperate and in need and need the same acknowledgement. I always say, look, your loved one's gone on a long holiday with a one-way ticket. Your ticket will come after. And as you know, I've sat in some fabulous physical circles where what you see is unrefutable, totally unrefutable.
No doubt working in the library gave you access to as
Yes,
many books as you could imagine.
I could. I mean, I'm a massive, my whole library is stuffed full of spiritual books, the old books, the new books. And I read whatever I can. And I think you get to a certain point with knowledge where you think, right, I know this is what it is, and you just have an acceptance. And then from there on, it's just like we were talking about angels. Yes, I believe in them. And you come to a point where you think that people who don't believe as you do are strange.
Yeah, that's right. That's excellent. And your working career then was in the university, running the library,
Yes,
wasn't it?
yeah, I've been in a
Local
library and
university.
student capacity for over 23 years now. So, and you know, you do meet, and again, that is you need people who need help. You do get people coming your way, you've lost people, and roundabout ways, you somehow get talking about the subject with a lot of students, which is interesting. It seems right, the right time, the right place. So I think even then in your working life, you still come across people, as you probably find, who are sent just to have a word, and you can change their whole outlook.
And that's a form of healing as well, isn't it? Like
Exactly,
the
yeah,
right word at the right
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
And you mentioned years ago to me about the murder that occurred in the house that you're living in.
Yeah, and I shouldn't laugh, but unfortunately,
No,
the husband killed his wife. When you don't
no,
believe in death, murder just means we've gone on. But he did kill his
extreme.
wife in the kitchen, and this house was shunned. But my belief is people commit murders, not houses. So we bought it, and the very first thing I did was to get a good friend of mine, a highly respected medium, to come and cleanse the house with a sage stick, do a ceremony. She said, "You'll be here a long time and there is nothing here." Now, that was right because we didn't intend to stay here that long, but we've been here 22 years. Now, the only occurrence we've ever had was been two instances. Is once I was sitting on the sofa and I heard someone crying at the end of the sofa. So I turned round thinking it was my daughter. There was nobody there. But the second more interesting one is my eldest had her friend to stay, and up in her bedroom, which is obviously, you know, high up, the friend turned round and started to cry because she could see a woman looking in the window with black curly hair, blue eyes, very pretty. Now, this was a perfect description of the lady who was murdered. So in all those two instances, I've never felt anything, but I said I did get it blessed. We wished her well, her spirit. But yeah, we were the bit of the village freaks buying a house that was new. But when you believe in life after death, you have a whole new concept of how you believe anyway, you know. I mean, I've been to see a lot of physical mediums. I do remember one where it was an old gentleman, and I remember shaking his hand, which was rotating 360 degrees, which is impossible for a
Possible.
human
Yeah.
hand. The medium had quite an old gnarly hand with wedding rings that had been on for years, and this was a different hand. It was a long old hand, like a brownish hand, and it rotated perfectly. But we did sit in a physical circle for about 5 years that I know you came to. Uh, as we were a sort of an energy for the medium, but gosh, the physical phenomena was, I mean, I remember the medium, as with physical mediums, could be quite a large person. And I do remember one night in the cabinet, something was all quiet, and I could feel my hair being brushed from above. And then when we came to, the physical medium was actually behind and threaded under my chair. Now, considering the chairs were right up to the edge, they must have transported her. And I also remember, you know, we had lights, you had people touching you, you'd have water thrown at you. But I do remember specifically one night the cabinet closed, and I thought, you know, that your mind tries to get realistic, you know, logic, what's happened. It looked like somebody had thrown a pancake on the black thing. It was a big splodge, a big, like, creamy splodge. And I'm in my mind thinking, who's thrown food at the cabinet? But when we all looked inside this splodge, a little face appeared. in a blue light, and it was looking at us as clear as day, and then it gradually faded away. So I think that physically, and the movement, the voices, the children's laughter, the apports, connecting. This was a direct voice medium, so you spoke to the people directly. And I do have the accolade of insulting Winston Churchill.
Oh, lovely.
Because I saw a light and I said, oh, look, there's a blob of light. And in his own voice, everyone knows Churchill voice, it came out, Madam, I am not a blob. And when anyone says Churchill, I say I insulted that man, but he actually said, Madam, I am not a blob. And that was just blew my mind. So we met some very famous people. And it's an experience. Once you've had that, you will never, ever doubt in life after death. It was very talented, rare gift, and phenomenal, as you know.
So the 5 years then would have been with the Cristanucci.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if
yeah.
she's still running it even.
I don't know. I don't believe she's doing. I think she does a dance circle with somebody goes into trance and dances, but that physical circle is finished, and I believe the medium has moved to Torquay, so that is now finished quite a while ago, actually. Yeah, but to be in that just once was A, highly honouring, and B, it's something you'll never forget. The names that we had through the famous people. And all the physical effects, as you know, the touch, the laughter, the hair ruffles, things thrown at you. It was no way can that be. I'm quite a skeptical person. I'll always look for the rational. I mean, I had a friend once who said I was in Tesco, my grand's here because a loaf of brown bread threw in on the floor in front of me. I must eat more roughage. No, I think it's ridiculous. So I will look for the logical. But these things cannot be faked. And it was such an honor, an incredible memory.
Yeah. So with the hand then, was that in that circle?
No, this was in another. I've been to a few physical circles, and this was in one where the medium was an old man. I should remember his name, but I don't. He's probably passed. And he was in a very small cabinet, and it was right by where we were sitting. So there's absolutely no way, but his guide was a monk, and then the hand that came under the cabinet was a very long hand. So it had the impression of a very big, tall person. And as I said, you can't rotate your hand through, but this was going round and round, and we all shook hands. And afterwards, I spoke to the gentleman. He showed me his hands, and he was an old man, and he had wedding rings, the kind that you can't remove. And he said, look. And I just knew there was nobody hiding there. And it was a very old monk. And you hear the voice, he'd say, nice to meet you, in a very sort of spiritual, soft voice. So.
Can you remember where that was?
Gosh, somewhere in England. I can't. It's going back.
Is it done in Portsmouth? They do a lot of physical circles.
I can't. I mean, I'm from the physical circle with Emily. I haven't sat in a physical circle since.
Yeah.
The really good ones are few and far between and hard to get into, actually. But I did at that time go to quite a lot. But I do remember the monk as standing out, as well as that teleporting of the medium over my head and threading her between my chair, which she was a very large lady, and that would have been impossible.
And that's in the Cristanucci circle.
Yeah, that was in Cristanucci's, yeah.
There is a man who regularly read reports of a hand in appearance. I've forgotten his name as well.
I should remember.
I don't think it was Stuart Alexander, was it?
No. Was his name Bill? Was his first name?
Bill, Bill Williams.
And then there was another one with Warren
Kaler.
Yeah, I've been to a few of them. And there was another one, a dark-haired gentleman, a young boy, I can't remember his name, but I think there was a bit of a controversy about him. I can't remember his name.
Gary Mannion, there was controversy around.
I think that's the one, yeah. I think that's the one. As I say, when you go to these things, I do look for the realistic first, because that's what cynics are going to be doing. So I look, could that be done? Could that be done? I always go in and think, right, as a true advocate for spirit, we can't have anyone faking because it gives such a bad reputation. I always look, how can that be done? And I've come to the conclusion some of the things that I've seen are absolutely 120% impossible.
Yeah.
You sat in that circle, and some of the characters that got through, we got quite attached to them as well. I remember particularly, I was very honoured to have Doris Stokes took a shine to me, and I've always been a fan of Doris Stokes, got all her books. And we had a real good dialogue with Doris Stokes, and she used to single me out, and that used to make me feel so wonderful. So, hi, Doris.
Well, that particular medium in that circle, that was in the Cristanucci circle, wasn't it? And that medium did a variety of voices, and her singing voice was beautiful.
Famous voices. We had Sid James, Margaret Rutherford. We even had Freddie Mercury. We had Winston Churchill. We had some other people that we didn't know, a little boy called Sam, who was a little tinker. But if you knew these people, Arthur Conan Doyle, I had the honor of, I said, who did you base Holmes on? Oh, I didn't know who he based Holmes on, Arthur Conan Doyle. And he told me it was on a doctor he worked with called Bell, and that his mind was the same. So after I left the circle, and if you hear Arthur Conan Doyle speak, it was the exact same soft Scottish brogue. And after I left the circle, I researched it, and every word is true. And I didn't know that going into
No,
the circle that he based it on one of his medical, professors.
he used to call himself Arthur Doyle, didn't
Yeah.
he? We all call him Donut, but he never
Yeah, but the voices, the genuineness of the voices was phenomenal, especially Churchill.
did. Well, I can remember Churchill starting out, and he used to practice. It was all about practicing over and over, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
Winston used to say, "I shall
Oh,
converse.
I shall
I shall
converse.
converse."
Yes, I shall converse. Yes,
Yeah.
they all had these little catchphrases, and I say you got very attached to them, and they almost became your friends in a way.
Yeah.
And also, the medium did some excellent physical, almost like psychic surgery healing, because I remember having a bad hip. I was being treated for groin strain, went to have a session with that medium laying on the bed. And I'll never forget, she looked up into the corner speaking to someone, and somebody said to her, it's in the bone. So in a man's voice, she said, it's in the bone. And when I actually got eventually to the NHS, the surgeon turned to me and he said, it's in the bone. The
Well,
very same words. Yeah.
yeah.
It was
Well,
such an honor to be in that. Yeah.
that is the beauty of physical mediumship. But that particular circles
Mm.
with Krista Nucci, because I attended 3 different types with her. There was the one who was purely trance medium.
Yeah.
I had him invited to this room. He did a demonstration in this very room. And the whole time he was in trance, his hands were vibrating.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, you were there, I think. Yeah.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, very fast vibration.
Yeah.
You can almost hear it. And the other guy was the one you mentioned earlier with the
Warren.
dancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if his name was Warren. It wasn't Warren Kaler.
Oh, I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, we had
I
Warren
do
Kaler
remember
to
I
the
was in
house.
your
Yeah.
kitchen and the medium, the man, walked past me, and I turned round because I turned round to shut your kitchen door because something happened behind me. So I turned round to shut your kitchen door because it was so cold. And what I realised, your door was closed, but he'd walked behind me, and it was like somebody put liquid ice on your back. And I don't know what that energy was, but it was sheer ice, and he was standing behind me.
Well, that would have been Warren Kaler, that one, I think.
Yeah, that was very
He's
strange
the
as
only
well.
physical medium we've had to the house. He came twice. But
I'd like to get back into that, to sit in more physical
yeah,
as an
very
energy
rare now,
source,
isn't
because
it?
I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, the guy who did the dancing was
He's
my
Richard
age.
Etherington, yeah.
Yeah, he's easily my age, and he was in his middle 50s at the time. He used to live down Somerset way, but he used to travel up to Pontypridd, didn't he?
His dancing is, I know some people can be cynical, his dancing is very strange, because at one stage he goes on the floor and he does something with his hands that is so fast, the vibration, it almost becomes subhuman, because I don't think the hands can move that fast, and they blur. So it is very, very strange. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
I didn't see that one with him, but I've seen at least 2 sessions with him. And, he's my sort of age. He has a terrible chest because he's
I know. He becomes like a young flamenco.
I know. He had a bigger pot belly than I had.
Yeah, and at the end he was completely shattered. But
yeah, and he would have this tea towel in the flamenco dance, and he'd whip it round his head like a cape.
Yeah.
Bring it to the floor, and the first time I saw it, that tea towel landed in a perfect rectangle on the floor.
Wow.
But when you try it yourself, it never does.
You couldn't do it. And you couldn't do what Richard does, because, I mean, and he's such an example of someone who's almost totally taken over by spirit. If dancers up there want to come back and have a quick fling here, they obviously use Richard, because some of the movements were not human, I would say. They're not of this world, how fast. And it became almost like a hummingbird, that fast. It was very strange. It was very entertaining, very uplifting.
Well, I would have loved to have seen that. What I did see with him was all in light. He didn't have a blacked out seance at all. It was always in light. This film which I don't know if Christinucci has still got it on the website that she had for the circles, but there's film on her website of Richard sitting in the chair.
Oh,
So
wow.
one in the cabinet. There's only the one chair, wasn't it? Which is a very big, heavy chair.
It was a big chair, yeah.
He is sitting in it, and he's looked heavier than I am.
Oh,
And that
did it
chair,
rock? Yeah. Oh, yes, it moved
well, it
around.
did more than rock. It
Yeah, I remember
slid,
that. The chair
slid
used to
into the
move
room.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, he's sitting in it, and it's sliding.
Yeah, and it was. I remember seeing that, being there when that happened. I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, I don't know if he still does. He's actually a friend of mine on Facebook. I should ask him. He
Yeah,
seems to travel the world a lot. Whether he still does it.
worth finding out. But
Mm,
what we witnessed with that circle was we didn't have to worry too much about all the security precautions that are
mm.
taken when you have a public demonstration.
No,
Because there was no money changing hands
there
whatsoever.
wasn't. It
There
was
was
a
no,
very private circle, but I wished it had been a bit more for mankind, I think, because,
maybe,
to me, to get the message out there is life after death. Well, it's world breaking, isn't it?
is
Yeah.
world record. All we ever paid was by taking a sponge or a
Yeah, a sponge
cake.
and
We
a
used to like cherry
bag of
cake.
scones. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a
lovely.
wonderful, wonderful experience, of which I will and when I pass over, I'm going to look some of these people up, little Sam and
Yeah,
Magnus. I'm going to go and say hi, and
yeah,
Doris.
yeah. And that was the amazing thing, because it was proven over and over again to us. We didn't need to do the security issues, but they
No.
did the security issues. And I
Mm.
think I mentioned on one of my review type things, where I give my own anecdotes. There was the time when Christinucci tied the medium into the chair with 3 foot long bootlaces.
Yeah.
And before she closed the curtains, the red light was still on. And then she heard the voice, "Lady, inspect your work." Do you remember that? Were you there then?
I do remember that. Yes, lady.
I've already described my recollection of the experience. Can you describe what you can
It's
remember?
when you're saying it now, I can remember it, but I can't remember more than that. That somebody said lady,
Yeah,
but of course I remember tying Colin Fry into the chair when he was young and starting off as a physical medium. Which, was he Lincoln or something? But I actually tied Colin Fry in the chair as well. Yeah, so.
so you've seen quite a few physical mediums.
I remember Gordon Higginson coming to a woman at the back in London and going, "Madam, you lifted 58 Cherry Lane, you were married to Alfred, and your telephone number," and he reeled it all off. Well, the woman nearly collapsed with shock. But of course, with Gordon, you probably know the thing that he went to church as a young boy because his mother used to put him in the cupboard and teach him mediumship. And he went to church, and the medium said, "Oh, your mother's coming through," and he said, "No, no, she's not. I've left her at home." "Oh, she has," and he went home, and his mother had passed away.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I do remember. I mean, Gordon Higginson was not of this earth, really. He was, but then again, as all mediums, no matter how good, if the energy's not right, I do remember somebody who knew Gordon quite well saying sometimes I wouldn't pass the road to have a sitting with him, which goes to show, even those who think the best, it can, with the energy in the person, it can dip like a radio wave all the time. But to me, I've never seen anything like that, and
Wow.
everything was right.
Yeah. So I was going to say about the bootlaces, she had to repeat the tying up 2 or 3 times.
Really, yeah.
And literally she turned around and it was undone again. And they were all knotted in the same,
That's ringing a bell. Who said the words Madam Inspector? Was it Magnus or?
probably Magnus, yeah. It
Yeah,
was the
Madam
same guide
Inspector.
as you mentioned, Colin Fry. It was the same
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
And
that's right. It was, yes, yeah.
when you hear the recordings of Magnus through Colin Fry, Magnus,
I've listened to that, yeah,
Magnus sounds like a younger man.
yeah.
When you hear Magnus through the medium in Christinucci's circle,
He sounds like an older
voice,
man.
same humour, but a
Yeah.
much older man.
He used to be quite scare me. I used to find him quite intimidating.
His Victorian attitudes, I suppose.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
no, he's a lovely guy, and
yeah.
you were able to get private readings with
You
the
were,
medium,
yep,
which I did have
definitely.
one. I'm not sure if I got the recording, but you're talking 1-to-1 with Magnus then
I
about
know.
your
Well,
spiritual
he
development.
also used to come in through the healing. So when you were having a healing session, which was almost like a form of psychic surgery, Magnus would pop in and be there for the healers or the surgeons who worked through Emily as well.
Yeah, and it's quite clearly the same man as the Colin Fry recording,
Oh,
but
undoubtedly.
older era.
Undoubtedly, yeah, undoubtedly.
So
And
he
it
was the
was,
master of ceremonies. Now with that particular medium was a blacked out seance, wasn't it? They
It
would
was
put the red light
totally,
on here
yeah,
and there, wouldn't they?
yeah.
And were you there? Did we all go together the first time I went? I went with Neil.
Yes, we did. Yeah, I was there in the beginning with Neil, then he left, and we all left eventually. But yes, yeah,
Eventually.
Neil was there,
Well,
yeah.
on that first occasion, was that the occasion that we first saw the medium's legs from the knee down to and the ankles vibrated?
Yeah, they used to
Vibrated.
vibrate. They also used to sort of merge into nothing, and they used to become blurry. And her hands, especially, used to change in all kind of weird shape. And also, she had a lot of face transfiguration, where her face would completely change. She'd have a moustache, a beard, and of course, Emily did not have that. But we used to see a lot of transfiguration, especially of strong men, which was undoubtable. I know you look and you look away, but they were so strong, and the way her hands and feet used to vibrate, then they would sort of disappear. And then at one stage, you could put your hand in and you'd shake a hand, and there would be like an aroma, and it wasn't, and somebody would speak to you in the cabinet, but you knew it was not a woman who was speaking to you.
Most definitely. There's so many different men, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Especially Wolf Messing. He was a
Oh, yes. Well,
very deep
well,
voice, wasn't it?
Can you imagine how hard it is to not only emulate a man's voice, but to emulate quite famous and very strong voices like Margaret
Deep voice.
Rutherford, from
Yeah.
Margaret Rutherford to Winston Churchill to Sid James, and all their direct voices as they were? That is almost impossible unless you're a stand-up comedian who'd learned for years in bright lights. So it was truly fascinating, and I always felt very honoured to be a part of it. Never get anything like that again.
Well, it would. Hopefully, we will, and maybe we could
Well,
entice
Michael
them back
Rowe
into the work.
wanted all this to be spread around the country as proof for life after death. But this particular woman, who was apparently a very good physical, was actually frightened off, and she said, "I can't do it. I have children." And she said she had been visited by someone from the government. It was all very hush hush, which Michael Black said was tantamount to the Men in Black, and she'd been frightened off, and she never went forward with it.
Yeah,
And this is the lady who produced the little boy and his own father, who put his hand through straight through a wooden table. So,
if you read the pamphlet that Michael Rolls did,
mm.
it may be on his website. He actually says that they gave her death threats. Well, and the family.
He did say death threats, and I know a lot of the American UFO people have actually said that this Men in Black is not, whatever his name is on the telly, Tommy Lee Jones. He said there are actually Men in Black that come down, and so I am convinced somewhere there's a society that wants to keep the truth from people. I'm not a passionate believer, but Michael was absolutely fanatically passionate about getting this across, but people are trying to repress it, because I suppose if people know you don't die, that's probably the greatest revelation since Google.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the control, isn't it? The
Yeah,
fear. I mean,
exactly.
that's your greatest fear of death.
Yeah,
There is no fear
exactly.
of death. And they
But I
use.
think when you've been in it as long as we both have, you get to a point where you can be intelligent and rational, and you just know that no matter how scientifically and rationally you look at things. I mean, I remember waking up one night and the whole of my bedroom wall, one side was purple and one side was painted green, and it was light, and I'm thinking, lights. What on earth has happened? And this voice just said to me, spread the knowledge, spread the knowledge. And I was wide awake. And then it gradually faded into my bedroom wall. Now, I wasn't on drugs or anything. So you do see certain things. I've seen, funny enough, I was talking to your wife, Margaret, about it about 7 years ago. I was walking my dog on the path, and this little man came towards me with his little dog. It was a Scotty dog, and he had a tartan coat on. And I remember the man had a blue mac and a brown flap hat. And I looked down at my dog to pick him up, because he hates dogs. He would attack it. And by the time I picked him up, this little man had disappeared. And I remember saying to my dog, Buttons, I think we've seen a ghost. Anyway, strangely enough, I was telling Margaret a couple of weeks later, and she said, did the dog have a little cut? Yeah, was the man here? And she said, I've had his daughter here this morning for coffee. He died on that path 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So I'd seen his go, and it was as clear as day, completely normal. But within 3 seconds, him and the dog had disappeared. And she said, yes, he passed away, and there was flowers there 2 weeks ago when I'd seen his ghost. You
Amazing.
can't refute
Amazing.
things like that. Yeah.
That's right. And if you stood up in a court of law and you'd say, I swear this is the truth, the
Yeah.
whole truth, nothing but the truth, then what you say and how you speak That's your testimony, isn't it?
Well,
That's your
it's
evidence.
nice also if you get evidence, because talking about the UFO I saw when I was very young, about 20, and I was going up a country lane, and I don't know what made me look up, but all I can describe, it was the size of two Tesco extras above my head, and it seemed very, very close, and it blacked out the whole sky, but there was absolutely no noise whatsoever. I can only describe it as the biggest rectangle you've ever seen, and all along the outside were tiny lights. And I remember looking up, and it literally was like one of these, films where it all goes dark. And I was with my boyfriend, and we looked up, and it was completely silent. And it was so big, it took a long time to clear our heads and go over the country fields in the dark. So we looked at each other, did you see that? But strangely enough, the next day, as it had travelled, two coppers had seen it, two policemen in their car, and it was on the front page of the local paper. It was the Echo, and they had drawn the shape they saw, which was exactly the same. So it's nice when you do have stand up in a court of law, you've got the evidence there as well. And that had to be UFO. I've never seen anything like it, and it was completely noiseless. No, it was gliding, just amazing.
That was as big, you said, as two Tesco
Oh, it was
extras.
huge. It was
So
absolutely
that's
huge.
a Tesco extra is a
Oh,
great big, as does Walmart.
yeah.
The
I've
biggest
never seen.
supermarket you can imagine,
It
and
was so
the
dark
biggest.
that you were underneath it for quite a while before it cleared. And always remember it was a starry clear night, and you could see stars. And as it cleared, you were under it for a while until it went to your head, and then you could see the stars again. And
Well,
tiny little lights, completely silent though.
really tiny little lights. How far up in the sky do you think?
Well, to me, it almost felt like it was only 200 feet up in the air. It was so low. It just seemed very, very close, almost like it was skimming over you. So, a couple of 100 feet up. It certainly wasn't right up in the sky. It was because I remember thinking, good gosh, is that going to fall on our heads? It was very, very low. But the strangest thing of all wasn't the sound. Sorry, it wasn't the size of the lights. It was the complete silence. I don't think if we'd have looked up, we'd have seen it, but it was completely silent. And I mean totally silent. So there is a force out there with far greater technology.
Did you see the two policemen? And
I didn't. They'd
they
interviewed
were
them in the
somewhere
paper.
nearby, was it?
No, they were. It had travelled from us, it was went over Craiger actually. It had travelled to another area. It had been reported by a few members of the public, so the actual police went out and they saw it. And on the front of the paper, they drew the shape, and it was the two policemen who gave the evidence of what they saw, seen, which I think was probably poo-pooed down very quickly. But
But
that,
they're officers of the law. You would have to
yeah.
take their testimony,
Well,
wouldn't you?
they probably had to knock on the door from Tommy Lee Jones or something with his
Yeah.
gun.
Well, Carl Sagan, he used to be full um, of saying that there's such a thing as UFOs, and
Oh, undoubtedly.
then all of a sudden, overnight, no, there's no such thing.
Ah,
In other words, Men in Black had a knock on his
or
door.
maybe monetary incentive. But if you watch some of
Yeah.
these documentaries, that ranch out in America, and a lot of these people who've had operations and they found substances in them that they cannot explain. So, how do you explain that? And, the Roswell, I'm quite interested in that. And, some guys have said, I was told to lie. I had to scrunch up metal. So when you watch it, it's fascinating viewing. I know you kind of get a bit of histrionics, but these people who they interview, they do seem really credible, and they've got scars and things like that. So, my mind, undoubtedly, there is something.
Well, I think
Um,
I know at least 15 people, if not more,
mm,
who, like yourself,
mm,
will testify what they've seen, and they've seen things they
mm,
can't explain in the night sky or the daytime sky even.
exactly. Yeah,
And
exactly.
one family were over in Bedlinnock, and the whole street were out looking up at this
Really.
vehicle. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the same vehicle as the one you saw, because it was about that time. Was that early 80s, maybe?
Yes, it was early 80s, actually. Yeah.
I
And
think it
I know,
might
I
have
mean, if
been
I
that.
ever researched the press going back, if I had the time, I would probably find that article somewhere, because it was on the
Yeah,
front of the South Wales Echo with the shape, and it was local phenomena, and two
yeah.
policemen were interviewed.
Well,
But
the Bedlinnock story definitely ended up in the papers, and my friend, when I mentioned your story and his story being very similar at the same
mm,
sort of time, he dug it out and he found it. But I also spoke when I was at a church service once with a man who said he was, I'm not sure if he was from Bedlinnock, but he was a musician, and they had a band and they had a van. and they either kept the van or the equipment, speakers, etc., in a barn on a farm above Bedlinog.
Yeah.
So 2 o'clock in the morning, they were coming back from their gig. They parked the van up, and maybe if they were emptying it, they emptied it. And then they started to watch a UFO. And he went down the hill on his own because nobody else would go with him to get closer to this UFO, which was just hovering above the ground, just a few hundred yards away.
No
The whole
way.
band saw at the same
Wow.
sort of time in the same sort of place
Wow.
as you and the families in Bedlinog.
Wow. I
But
mean, when
even
there's
rather
more
than
than one
fun,
person, I
yeah.
remember, when you have a group of people, that's far harder to discredit. For example, we used to do what you'd call ghost hunting, and down in Carew Castle near Tenby, I remember we had loads of little stones thrown up, but at one stage, right up in the castle turrets where nobody could get, we could see two bright red lights that were moving so fast, and everybody saw that. And you think, even if someone had a laser, it was so strange, and the whole group of people were just watching it. So I think when you get a lot of people witnessing, it's far harder to discredit.
What do you think of those paranormal nights?
Well, strange enough, I was asked to go on one, and I was asked to be the medium, but it turns out they didn't believe in life after death, so which is very strange. So when I started giving them evidence, I said, "Oh, there's a little boy here, and he used to help make honey." They've gone, "How do you know this?" And they sort of said, "You've looked it up," and I said, "No, I haven't." So when they started to get evidence, they became a bit concerned. So I said, "Do you not believe?" And they said, "No, no, no, no." So I left. Then they sort of changed their mind and said, "Oh, we've got," and I said, "No, I cannot be somewhere where you do not believe after." And then the other hand, another group I joined, they used to try to bait evil spirits, go, "Come on, and I had to leave that. So I think they're very okay if you're run by people who know what they're doing and believe and are professional. But I did see some clowns, unfortunately. So yeah, interesting. But then to us, it's interesting, but then again, because we believe, it's not going to really knock our socks off, because if
No.
if someone appears in, for I was the pub landlord in 1800, we probably just say, "Hi, how are you doing?" Whereas a lot of people, I do remember a lot of people rang, we were in Markham Park, and we were up in the room, and the man said, "Look, there's definitely something up there," and I could feel something, and I think everyone could. So we were in a circle, and somebody pushed me. So all the women immediately ran screaming out of there. So it was me and the guys left, and I just laughed and said, "Push me again," which he did. So, but I think with your spirit, if look, okay, you passed the other side, you're being silly, nothing really happened, but why are you going to go if you're going to be that frightened? It's a whole mishmash bag of people who don't believe or do believe, or they want to go for the thrill. But I think it detracts various aspects of society where really you need to believe, and you need to know there's life after death. So
Yeah. You never felt any fear or anything of that?
no, I don't get frightened of anything in the spirit
No,
world. So
but in
people
the
frighten me, Paul. People
yeah,
frighten me. Putin
but,
frightens me, but not
yeah,
spirits
not
ever.
not dead people. No, the Christianucci circle that was so loving, wasn't it, and
Oh,
so
it's
genuine.
beautiful. I
And
do remember in Llancairfrau, they said we have the most haunted room upstairs. Who's going to go up? I was up that ladder straight away, put my head up, didn't feel a thing. But
no,
when it comes to, do you want to go in that recess? The headless horseman's in there, I'll be the first one in. And usually it's nothing. But as
nothing
I
at
said,
all.
people frighten me, not the spirit world.
Well, that's been fascinating. Short hour. It's not quite an hour.
Gosh, that's flown, isn't it?
I don't think there's anything missing, is there? I think we've covered
No, I
everything.
mean, talking of evidence, like I say, if people, my belief is, if you've lost someone and you're grieving, you'd ring a friend, you go, or how you doing? My belief, I always say, go to see some really good mediums and have a chat with your loved one, and to end on a note, your own dear good wife, who was the most fabulous medium. I lost my dad a while ago, and there was one word that could bring my dad back, and she turned to me and she said, "Licorice." Now,
Well,
fabulous. So, going back to full circle to you, I know Margaret doesn't do a lot of sittings, but I was phenomenally grateful because you just get the evidence, it's fabulous evidence. And just go and ring someone, which means go see a medium, get your evidence. And to me, it's very natural, like picking the film. But of course, our beliefs are our beliefs. And I do realize that some people may not feel like us at all and be offended, etc. But to me, it's all completely natural. This is the hard side. This is the hard side, I think. Be nice over there, especially the way the world is.
in a nutshell, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hazel.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Take care. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Yeah.
Bye.